Hi there, welcome to 90% Knitting. This is episode 304 and I'm Lisa, your host, also known as Fiber Nymph. And happy Monday! Today is Monday, January 28th. And here in southwestern Pennsylvania, it's bright and sunny and very, very cold. It was 6 degrees when we woke up this morning. I think it's probably up in the 20s by now, I would think. But yeah, it's cold, and it's just going to get colder. This week's going to be a cold one. I know we're supposed to have like negative single-digit temperatures in the morning. I think Wednesday. I don't know. But whatever. It's fine. I've got woolly things to keep me warm. Hopefully you guys will keep warm too if you are also in the cold climates. Anyway, how are you? I hope you had a nice weekend. I'll tell you about mine a little bit later. But anyway, I wanted to record today because it is beautiful and I don't really know that the weather is going to be conducive to having good natural light the rest of the week. So it seemed like a good day for me to record an episode. So let me just run down what we're going to talk about. I'm looking at my show notes down here on the computer in case you're wondering. I have a finished object. I've got some works in progress. I've got some upcoming things I'm going to talk about. I have another Crafty Endeavor, which is something different. I'm going to talk about our Whipstravaganza, a long-ish thing going on in the group. And then I have something new, a new activity that I want to run by you to see if there's any interest in it. And then we'll have some 10% and then a little bit of shop news. I have a finished pair of socks. So these are, the colorway is the Rhinebeck sweater weather colorway that I did for Needles Up. This was the exclusive colorway that I did for Needles Up Rhinebeck last year. And I had finished one sock. This was the first one that I finished to have as a sample at the show. And then I had never done the second one. So I cast it on and I realized when I decided that this would be my sock that I was going to work on. Like I said, socks, or I said earlier in other podcasts recently, socks are not my focus right now. My sock mojo's kind of, not sure where it's at right now, but I have one sock that's traveling around in my car with me so that I can knit on it when I have time, when I'm out sometimes. And then I'm keeping one, I did have it down in my studio, but I found that I wasn't really having time to work on it down there, so I keep it on the dining room table, and it's just an easy project for me to work on, you know, after my husband and I finish breakfast or dinner or whatever, and we're just sitting there. So I occasionally work on it then. But anyway, when I went to start the second sock, I realized I had never even made a project page for these socks on Ravelry, so I had no notes, and I did not have the needle that I used for the first sock in the project bag with the yarn, and so I really wasn't even sure what size needle I had used for the first one. So I went with my default for number 2, which is a US 1, and that's what I knit the second one out of. Obviously I knew the stitch count because I could count, which I did. It was a 64 stitch 3x1 rib cuff. And then the top of the foot is also the ribbing. I did the Non-Euclidean heel by Sarah Jordan, and that's where I seem to goof up. The first one looks great, and I think it's right. The second one turned out really wonky. I mean, you can see there's like definite wonkiness going on with this second sock here, and it messed up my stripes too. I just don't know what I did wrong. I really thought I was reading the instructions correctly because I was following her instructions, Sarah's instructions, as I did this since it had been so long since I had done this other heel. And I've only used this heel on one other sock so far, and that was my Dark and Stormy socks, which I've also not done the second sock yet. But both of those were last fall, and I didn't have enough memory of how this heel was done. So I really thought I had followed the instructions to a T, but apparently either I did and this is how it's supposed to look and this is the one I messed up, which is completely possible, or I just totally messed this up. I don't know. the bottom line is it put it off by about one stripe, excuse me, about one stripe width, which is why I now ended up with a little bit of blue on the toe on this one. I don't really care that they aren't matchy-matchy, because I'll wear them, and honestly, your foot is what's in the shoe anyway. The cuffs actually do match up. I'm so perplexed as to what I did wrong. I don't know. I mean, I have a hunch that I know what I did wrong, but like what I think I did on the first sock didn't seem like what the instructions were telling me to do. I don't know. So I guess whenever I do my second dark and stormy sock, I will, I'll figure it out then maybe if I follow the directions and again have a wonky sock, because I didn't look at that first sock of the dark and stormies to see if it looks more like my original sock or the second sock. So if it, I guess that would probably tell me, you know, which one I did right and which one I did wrong. It doesn't matter. Like, I wasn't going to rip back when I realized it was goofed up. I figured it'll be fine. And they fit. I mean, they feel fine on my feet. Both of them are fine. Yeah, whatever. They're done. It's a finished pair of socks. And I did ask my husband if he liked this colorway, because I had said since it's a ribbed sock and he likes his socks with ribbing instead of stockinette cuffs, I was going to give them to him if he liked them, because he's okay with crazy colors. And he's like, oh, well, those are very colorful. I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, oh, I like them. He says, I'm not sure what I would be able to wear them with. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I do not color coordinate my outfits and my socks. Like, I wear whatever socks I want. I actually pick my sock colors based on my mood. Like, if I need happy socks, I pick brightly colored happy socks if I'm having a down day or something. You know, like, he likes his socks to somehow coordinate with whatever he's got on, which I think is funny because he wears mostly dark colored pants to work, right? So he's coordinating it with his sweater or his top or whatever he's wearing. And it's not like anybody's really looking at your top and then checking to see if your socks fit. But whatever. It just means I get a new pair of socks. So these will be mine and he will get some other pair of socks at some point in time. But that does give me another finished object for January, which is very exciting as I work through my whips. I did not update my spreadsheet. Sorry, Maria. I mean, I did update it on the computer, but I didn't print out another copy because I don't want to do that every single time I finish an object. I think I'll maybe print it out like once a month and I can share it to you, share it with you that way. But that does take, I have the, hang on, stretching, sorry. That does take my socks down to 3 pairs finished this year out of what, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, out of 14. So I had 14 pairs at the beginning of the year. I have finished 3 pair now. It's been a very productive January, quite frankly. And my car socks are actually kind of moving along. So eventually I'll have another pair. But now that I've finished my indoor socks, my socks that I'm working on in the house, I get to pick another pair out of my whip bin to finish, so we'll see which ones I choose. I should probably do the other dark and stormy so that I can do this heel again rather than wait a long time. Maybe that's what I'll do. We'll see. I'll show you next time. Alright, so that's my only finished object this week. Let me take another sip. I haven't been talking all day, so my throat's getting like tickly since I'm talking to you. Other than those socks, which honestly I didn't really feel like I put a ton of time in, but I guess I just had a lot of time at the dinner table this week. I've really only put my work time, my knitting time, into 2 other projects primarily. And this one I actually had thought might be finished for you this week, or well, finished, and I could show it to you this week, but it's not. I had some setbacks. So let me get it. Here we go. This is my Hedgewitch Shawl. So I have obviously made progress because you can see I've got contrasting color in here now. So this was originally cast on for the Hedgewitch cowl that was running from the full moon in December to the full moon in January. Fiber Trek and A Gentle Knitter, Sarah and Nicole, were hosting that. It's over now. Obviously I did not finish in time, but that's okay. I did end up having issues. So I think it was maybe 3 different times while I was in this main body part that I ended up having these stitch motifs not be lined up correctly. Or actually they were lined up. They were stacking instead of being offset. And the first time I noticed it after I was all the way through a whole knit row. So then I had to tink back the knit row and then tink back the pattern row until I got to the point where I had messed up. So I did that once. And then I did that same thing a second time, but I caught it sooner, so I did not have nearly as much tinking back to do. Then I was on the 12th out of 13 pattern repeats of that main body. When I looked at it, I was like, it's an 8-row repeat, and I had just finished the second row, and I turned it around and I looked at it, and I thought, something does not look right. And it wasn't that my little motifs were not staggered, they were, but something else. And I'm looking at it, and I realized that I had somehow, where is it now? Somehow, my center spine stitches had shifted over by 1 stitch. But I hadn't noticed it, and it was like 8 or 9 rows down where it had done that. So it was down here before this garter section. So it was down in here. And I'm looking at it, and I thought, well, first I thought, crap. Because ordinarily this would have been something that I would have just gotten to this point, and I would have dropped down like the 3 stitches that would have been involved in that and fixed them and worked the way back up. But I couldn't, because having done that, threw off all of these motifs that have the yarn over, like the stitch lifted over. And so in order to drop down, for that to work, I would have had to have kept moving over 1 more stitch, and then it would have involved like another stitch. I just couldn't figure out a way to do that it wasn't going to turn into a big involved mess and potentially not work anyway. I ended up ripping out 8 rows, 8 or 9 rows, I can't remember now. I laid this out flat on the couch across, that's behind you, out, and I pulled the needles out carefully, and I just sat there and I ripped 1 row at a time. And what I had done, I had stuck my needle into the 2 center stitches of the last row that they had been done correctly, so that I would know where to stop and not tink back further than I needed to, or rip back further than I needed to. So I did that, and I did it very carefully. Now the nice thing is the yarn I'm using, this is my new Ridgetop DK, so it's the non-superwash. It's got enough tooth that I was not worried about stitches just dropping and falling and me running, having a mess that way. And it was good because the stitches did pretty much stay in place. So once I had ripped back and I got to the row where the center stitches were correct, I just sat on the couch and very slowly and carefully reinserted the needles across that whole row. And I mean, there were well over 200 stitches at that point. Yeah, I mean, there's probably over 300 now. But anyway, that was sort of an ordeal. And at that point, I decided I've had enough of this pattern. And I stopped. I stopped doing the pattern, and I put in the garter stitch section. I did rip back 9 rows. I know that now because I had to rip back so that the first row going in was going to be a wrong side row, which presented problems in and of itself, because to have put this first garter ridge in that way, I had to purl on the wrong side, which you're doing anyway, except in the garter section you're knitting on both sides. But I couldn't do that, or otherwise those little garter bumps, you get those little bumps when you change colors, you would have been able to see those on the right side. So I actually had to do a couple of extra rows on on this to do it so that you wouldn't see those. So this first contrasting section does look a little different because I don't know how well you can see it, but there's actually like 2 extra knit rows there that I didn't need to have, but I had to do that. So, and then I did not do it up here. This is a lot of explanation. I'm not sure how much this is even making sense. I understand it because I did it. Anyway, basically the main body section is short by 1 3/4 repeats is how that worked out. And I decided I didn't care. It's a huge shawl anyway. I'm not going to miss those repeats or the size that those repeats were going to give me. This is mainly going to be a show sample anyway in the short term, and it's fine that it's a little bit smaller. So anyway, when I started doing this first garter section though, I thought, well, maybe I can make up some of the width by making the garter section a little bigger. So I ended up doing 5 garter ridges instead of 4. I didn't want to make it much bigger than that. And then I went back into the patterning, which you were supposed to do. And at that point, it was off from what the pattern would have said, although miraculously I had the right number of stitches on each side of my center stitches, which I was kind of impressed with myself. Anyway, actually, no, the patterning is not off. I take that back. It's actually fine. Anyway, I was going to make that next pattern section bigger than what the pattern actually called for. Again, trying to make up for some of that size I lost by not doing as many repeats before the first garter ridge. And when I did 1 whole repeat of the pattern, and then I was on the second row of the next repeat, and I finished the second row and I looked at it, and again I'd screwed it up and my motifs were stacking, except I had missed it like, oh my god. And it was only a small segment. It wasn't even the whole row. But I was doing this in the car on Saturday. My husband and I did a day trip. And so I was talking to him and doing this, and I think that's what messed me up. So I sat there and very painstakingly dropped down 2 stitches at a time, 4 rows, fixed my issues, knit them back up, and then moved over 2 stitches. And I had to do that for probably at least 20 stitches. Oh, it took forever. And at that point, I decided I am done with this pattern. I'm getting to the end of this row, and I'm going to just do that final garter at ridge, or garter edge, which this one is like, the edge one is big. It's like 3 times this size. That's it. I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So that's where I'm at. Basically, I'm going to finish this with all the garter stitch that I need to do. I have 3 garter ridges now. I need to do, I think there needs to be 14 garter ridges, so I've got a ways to go. I need to wind another ball of yarn though. And then you do an I-cord bind off. I can't wait to have it done. It's actually super warm. Like as I was working on it in the car, it was on my lap and it was really cold that day. And my husband's car the heat is a little iffy in there. So it felt really good, and I can't wait to have it to wrap up in, but oh my goodness, I am so finished with this pattern right now. I'm just so frustrated with it. But I'm enjoying working with my yarn, I have to say that. I really have enjoyed working with this Ridgetop. It's super squishy, and it's very forgiving. Like you can rip out and tink, and it doesn't care. So that's a good thing too. Alright, so that's the saga of the Hedgewitch Shawl. And Hedgewitch is by Nat Raedwulf. And I will say the pattern is written just fine. There's nothing wrong with the pattern. All of the issues I'm having are completely operator error. All me. Anyway, so that was something I spent a ton of time working on this past week. And the other project that I spent most of my other crafting time on is my sweater, which I told you I cast on last week. I showed you what I had started, and I've been working on it. This is the classic Ladies Classic Raglan Pullover by Jane Richmond. That's the pattern that I'm using as my guide. At this point, I'm really not paying too much attention to the pattern because I've gotten through the yoke, and that was really the only thing I needed it for. was to know how many stitches to cast on. But this is the one that I'm doing as a fade, using some yarn that I dyed that was just like leftovers, mostly from like the end of the day when I was throwing dye on yarn, and I found these ones that thought, oh, they really go together well. Anyway, I told you about that last time. So here's what I have so far, and oh my goodness, I love it so, so much. So this is actually my Merlot color. The next one, this variegated, this was one that I just had a bunch of extra dye left one day, and I made a crazy variegated skein, and it looked really cool, and so I kept it. And then the next one is, it's not dark brown, but it's really close to dark brown. It's kind of a modified dark brown. And I'm now at the point where I'm going to start fading in my next color. And the next color will be this skein. That's just telling me which skein that is in the order. So that will be next. So it's going lighter now, clearly. And then I had two other skeins that I was going to use in this whole fade deal. But the more I looked at them, the more I realized they're not really going to work super well because they're both much more, I don't know. See, in this light, that doesn't look bad. But it didn't look right after the brown, and yet this one does look good after the brown, but then it looks kind of funny to put this darker back in. And then this one is more gray than it is any other color, and it just doesn't look right. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade in this lighter, real light kind of cocoa-y gray. It's almost like a grayish color. And then I'm going to do this gray, which is a light, this is Wisp actually. I think it's Wisp. It's Wisp, or a very modified, very similar Wisp. No, actually this one is Wisp. I know that because this is also a ball of Wisp. Although they look different in this light, but I think it might just be because of this one's already wound into a ball. Anyway, I'm going to use, this is my fourth color, and this is my fifth color, and I have this leftover ball, which is almost a full ball, also of Wisp, so the whole bottom will just be this color. And I think that's going to give me enough yardage because, yeah, I'm not going to do the math right now, but I figured it out, and I'm pretty sure that will be as much as I need because that's like 6 skeins of yarn, and that'll be plenty. I knew I wasn't going to need all 7 that I was starting out with, but this is my plan. I'm really hopeful that that'll work well. If I start into it and I think that it's not, I could dye up a different color, but I don't want to have to do that. I really wanted to use these. But anyway, I've been trying this on as I've gone along, and it's fitting really, really well. I decided not to do any shaping at all. I was originally thinking I might go down a needle size just to pull it in a little bit for some waist shaping, but I don't want any. I just want this to be a nice, loose, comfortable pullover. And that's what I'm getting so far. I just love it. I'm so in love with how these colors worked out. It's just making me so happy. So I can't wait to get working on that some more. Ugh, my yarn's falling all over the place. It's been such a joy. But like I said, I'm to the point now where I'm going to start fading in that next color, and then I'm saving about 30% of the skein for the sleeves. So I'm weighing I'm weighing the yarn as I go along. So anyway, again, all of the little details will be in the project pages. You can check them out there. And, oh, I wanted to say this at the beginning of the podcast and I forgot. Last time when I recorded, I had made the comment that if anybody was interested in me starting to add show notes in the YouTube description box, as well as on the Ravelry episode thread, to say something in the comments, let me know you're interested in that. And I would do that if there was interest. Well, oh my goodness, there was interest. So many people came back and said, yes, please put the show notes in the YouTube box. So I will be starting to do that as of this episode. Thank you for your feedback. I'm happy to do that. I'm not 100% sure that I can put links into everything. I don't know how that works because I've never tried doing that before, but I'll do my best. You'll at least have the information, even if it doesn't link directly to something, but I'll see what I can do. Anyway, so I will put that kind of information in there. That's it. That's all I really worked on this week as far as knitting projects. I was really, really dedicated to getting that shawl and this sweater moved ahead because I want to wear the sweater and I just want the shawl done. So hopefully one or the other will be finished by next week, and it'll probably be the shawl. As far as on deck, last week when I was recording, I also asked you for input on what kind of projects you would recommend to use up an entire skein of worsted weight yarn, which is what I'm trying to do mostly for Slay the Stash this year. Again, Slay the Stash is a project that, or a challenge that Boston Jen from the Downseller Studio podcast is hosting all year, where you declare a skein of yarn at the beginning of each month, and then you have to knit through the whole thing. I think you're allowed to have 3 yards left over, but to use up your stash. So I'm taking part in that this year, which I already did my January when I showed you that already. So anyway, I got a lot of really good suggestions from you guys of things I could do. So thank you so very, very much. I've bookmarked a whole bunch of patterns and ideas. Some of them actually would take more than one skein of yarn, but some of them were really cool, so I may end up doing them just as other projects. But anyway, thank you so much for that input. I also realized that there's probably some of those skeins of yarn that I'll end up doing as like some design, not so much samples, but to work out some design ideas that I have going on in my head. I have 2 different sort of collections that I keep thinking about wanting to do, and I think like the ideas have finally gelled enough that I'm going to start working on those. You know, my designing always takes me so long because I don't have a lot of time to devote to it. So who knows how long it'll take for that. But yeah, I'll probably do some of those projects also as my Slay the Stash projects. So I should be pretty well set for the year. Otherwise, let's see. Oh, other crafty endeavors. So like I had told you, one of my goals this year was to spend some time doing other crafty endeavors besides fiber arts and knitting and spinning and things like that I always do. Not that I've spun much at all lately, but you know what I mean. And so this week I actually pulled out something that I purchased the materials or the tools to do at Rhinebeck, and I hadn't played with it yet. And that was to do needle punch. So this is, well, the yarn's in it. So this is the needle punch tool. Now I do not know, I have to look this up, if needle punch and rug hooking is the same thing. Now I know it's not like latch hooking, that's a totally different thing, but I've seen actually the little booklet that came with this tool talked about using your punch tool for hooking a rug. So like, is it the same thing? I actually don't know. But it's really kind of cool. So I had purchased this tool and this, I think it's called monk's cloth. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, this fabric, it sort of looks like Aida cloth that you use for cross stitch. But anyway, I purchased this from a vendor, and I don't remember the vendor's name. I'll have to put it in the show notes. Because she had a bunch of really cool rug kits, like small rugs. And I was going to buy 1 or 5 because that's what I do. And I started talking to her and she's like, if you've never done this before, you might be better off just like getting the cloth, getting the tool and playing with it and seeing if you even like doing it. And so that's what I did. And the tool, she only had this size tool, and I asked her what weight of yarn this was good for, and she said bulky. And I said, but I have mostly like DK and worsted that I'll probably want to use. She's like, well, then double strand it. Well, I don't want to double strand it, so I'm just using it single. And I am having some issues, but I am playing with it, and it's fun. I know I am not doing it correctly because my little, well, I'm just starting out too, but my little loops are all very different in height. And I was having trouble making it seem dense enough. And I think that is because I am using a lighter weight yarn than what this tool is meant for. If I was using bulky weight, I'm sure it would be much easier to get a density that seems right. So I'm having to poke this in a whole lot more. Here's what the back looks like. See, I don't even know what this is supposed to look like on the back. And I have no idea why there's all this open space because it doesn't seem open on the front. I don't really know. I know nothing about this. I'm flying blind. I did read through the little booklet that came with the tool, which told me the basic how you do this. I admit that I read through the little booklet after I already started to try to do it. And I was getting nowhere. Then I'm like, okay, maybe I should read the instructions. So I did. I don't know. It's fun, and I have no intention of ever like doing major projects. Well, maybe I will. I mean, because she had some really cool patterns and kits that would have been fun to do, but I don't know. The hoop I'm using is just a plain old wooden like embroidery kind of hoop, cross stitch hoop that is not excellent for this. There are actual frames that you can get to do this, and I did not buy one of those, but I have her information, and I think I may actually order one. The other thing I think I'm going to order is this tool, except the one that's smaller, because there's different sizes. Like this is a 10, and they come in different sizes, and that size denotes how long your loops are. So like this number 10 is supposed to make a 1/4 inch loop. Like the height of the loop should be 1/4 inches. And then I think there's like 8, 10, 12, I don't know. And so that's what that denotes, because you're actually poking this in all the way up to the wooden handle. And then when you pull it back out, that's how big your loop's supposed to be, is like half of that. Or less than half of that, because the yarn's up there. However, there's also different like widths of this, and this is I don't think it's called wide. I don't know. There's this, and then there's fine, and the fine one is meant more for this weight of yarn that I'm using, and that's really kind of what I wanted when I was buying this. But she's like, nope, this is the one you're getting. I'm like, okay. So I think I'm gonna order the finer tool. And maybe the frame, so that this will be a little bit easier to do. I mean, I'm making do with this frame. It's okay, but I feel like I would enjoy doing it more if I had the proper tools. So we'll see. I'm not going to go buy a bunch of kits because I haven't caught on yet, but it is fun. And what I'm using is a whole bunch of hand spun scraps. Like I have leftover hand spun that isn't really enough to knit much of anything with unless I did something scrappy. But I think it would be really fun for this. So we'll see. I'm just playing with it and having a good time. But I would like to get the other tool because I think it might be a little bit easier to do with that. And I probably should also just go on YouTube and watch some videos, because that would also be helpful. I have not done that yet. So that's my other crafty adventure. I also did some more watercolor pens, but I've showed you that a couple of times now. I don't feel like you need to see any more of that. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is this idea that I have for, it's kind of a swap. I've never in the whole, we're like what, coming up on 8 years of this podcast, I don't think I've never facilitated a swap in this group ever, mainly because I don't want to be responsible for that. But for this I'm going to, and here's my idea. This will be for the spinners in the group, okay? It's going to be a fiber exchange / kind of spin along, spin together kind of thing. I know that sounds weird. Let me explain what I'm thinking. I thought it would be really fun for anybody who's interested in doing this. Let me know. And then I would pair people up, so you would each have a partner. And what you would do is choose a 4-ounce braid. It has to be 4 ounces just to keep it fair for everybody. Choose a 4-ounce braid that you have, and then split that braid in half, either lengthwise or just widthwise, whichever way seems to work best for the fiber you have. Probably to be the most equitable, unless you're really good at splitting them down the middle, is just to split it in half, you know, like that way, as opposed to pulling it apart. Anyway, divide your 4-ounce braid in half, and then you would send half of your fiber to your partner, and your partner would do the same thing. They would pick a braid, divide it in half, and send you half of theirs. Then what you guys are each going to do is spin each of those, and I don't mean spin them together. You could, but that's not the point of this. What I'm interested in is having each of you spin your fiber and your partner's fiber just to see how differently they would end up looking. You would be able to use like other fiber. So in that way, if you wanted, like if the fibers did coordinate, if you wanted to like spin each one and then ply them together, you could do that. Or let's say your partner sent you like some sort of like really blue, tealy kind of fiber, and you have a skein, you have a braid of, I don't know, bright yellow, and you think it would look really cool together. You know, you could use some other fiber, or if you wanted to maybe thread ply the fiber that you spun from your partner, whatever, just do something with their fiber, spin it and ply it and finish those 2 ounces, adding whatever you want to it, and then also do yours and do whatever you want to do with yours. And then your partner would be doing the same thing with their fiber and your fiber. And I just want you guys to be able to see the end product and see how differently they turned out, because that is something that always fascinates me, especially with like fiber clubs and like when I do the minis, the holiday minis, and people spin their fiber. 2 people can spin the same exact fiber and come out with such very different things. And I think if you have the latitude to add in other fibers or, you know, ply differently, whatever you wanted to do, I think it would just be so much fun to see that end product looking differently and be able to compare it. I don't know. Maybe that's a really stupid idea and nobody else would be interested in this, but essentially you'll end up with 2 different things of fiber in the end, unless again you decided to ply those 2 together, which would not be appropriate for everybody, I'm sure, because they may not go together. But you know, my thought is you would each end up with these 2 different things of fiber that you could use for whatever, you know, and then, you know, you're keeping what you spin. You're just swapping the fiber ahead of time and then sharing the results with your partner and with all of us. And I think it would be fun. If you guys think it would be absolutely weird, then tell me, yeah, Lisa, you're crazy. Let's not do that. But if you would be interested in doing that kind of a swap, say so in the comments, either here on YouTube or in the Ravelry thread, and if there's enough interest, I will set up a thread for sign-ups for that, and we will do that, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So I don't know, we'll see. Let me know what you think. I think that's everything for 90%. 10%, my husband and I went to Cleveland on Saturday for the International Motorcycle Show, which we go to pretty much every year. It was fun. It's always a nice day, just he and I getting to have kind of a date day. I end up with a good chunk of knitting time in the car because it's over 3 hours to Cleveland and back. So that's always a nice thing. Trying to fix that shawl in the car as we were going was not fun. Yeah, the show was fun. We didn't buy a thing, like not even, like we bought lunch. That was the only thing we ended up buying this year at the show. It gets smaller and smaller every year. I think more and more exhibitors are realizing that like Cleveland in January is probably not the biggest draw of a location. So there's always fewer and fewer vendors and exhibitors and dealers and like, you know, brands there to see, but it's still a fun time. We might go to the one in DC next time. It's not that much further away, frankly, and it's much, much bigger. They always have more things there to see. So anyway, but it was fun. That was Saturday. Sunday, we basically just spent the day here and did stuff around the house that we needed to do in the morning. Worked on some things together, and then in the afternoon Bill was working on his next project. He's got a motorcycle, well, he's got several that are project motorcycles, but he's got a 1971 BMW R75 out in the shed, if that means anything to anyone, that he's going to be restoring and refurbishing and rebuilding engines and transmissions and things with it. So he started working on that and ordering parts and figuring out what he needs to do. And I spent the afternoon organizing all of my business receipts in preparation to do tax stuff. So yay, that was a lot of fun. And I did laundry. I know how to live it up on a Sunday. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as that kind of stuff, 10%. The only other thing I was going to mention was the life goals section, since this is the last recording of January, and I told you I'd check in. So my life goals that I was kind of focusing on for January was 1, to drink more water, and 2, to rush less. So that was more of a time management kind of thing. I would say the drinking more water, I have been more conscious of that. I'm keeping that app on my phone, even though it annoys me once an hour and says, have you drank any water? It doesn't say it that way. But at least when it pops up, it does remind me, oh, have I drank some? So, I go do it. I'm not logging it on the app anymore just because that was getting to be a bit much, and I don't need that much water in my life. But I'm definitely drinking more water than I had been drinking. And as far as the not rushing, I feel like I have been doing better at managing my time and not trying to rush through projects, allowing enough time to get things done so that I don't feel like I have to hurry or rush. And when I do catch myself trying to maybe hurry up and get something done faster, I've been conscious of that, and have mentally just made myself slow down and realize that I will get it done probably just as quickly and with fewer errors if I slow down. So that's been good. I mean, and both of those things are things I can plan to continue throughout the year, but those were my foci for January. For February, the things that I've decided to focus on, one will be actually sort of an extension of the not rushing thing. Well, it's more an extension of the time management goal from January, another aspect of it, and that is to work more consciously at establishing boundaries within my time. For instance, making sure that I am actually making a conscious effort to take some time off on the weekends. I used to do that all the time. I used to always have like one day a weekend that I just didn't work, and that was great. And then I got away from that last year when life went kind of haywire and crazy and I was so busy all the time. And I really want to get back to that. So that's one part of it. Like not feeling the need to check email all the time. Spending less time on social media. I'm stopping short of like actually doing an official tracking my time. I feel like that would probably be beneficial, like to spend a week just like trying to track my time and what I spend my time doing for a week. But I know myself well enough to know that I'd probably do that for a day and a half and then stop. So I don't know. There's probably an app for it, actually. I should look into that, because if I can do it easier with an app, then maybe I would do it. But I do think that's a beneficial exercise. Like if you're having trouble getting things done, like tracking how are you spending your time? Because if you find out that you're spending like an aggregate of 3 hours a day on social media or something, maybe that's a little too much, maybe you could cut back. Part of it for me, I know, is if I have my phone handy, I'm much more likely to check social media or check my email constantly than not constantly, but every time I pick it up, than if I leave my phone, say, upstairs. The downside of that is I use my phone like when I'm working, I have it with me so that I can, watch podcasts or listen to a book or listen to music or whatever. So it does really have to just be a conscious effort to not get, derailed or distracted by those things. So that is my one focus for February that I want to work on, is just establishing those boundaries, both for my own, downtime sake, because I know that's healthy, and also for using my time more effectively and efficiently. And then the other one is more of a physical one. So I'm trying to do like one that's a practical thing and one that's a physical thing each month. I want to work on finding some stretches or exercises that will help strengthen my lower back and core and like my lower back and my hip muscles, because that's what I'm always having issues with, is my left hip and my lower back kind of right along the same level. As well as my core muscles, which I know would benefit all of that. So I know I have a gym membership that I'm not using, but like I'm trying to ease into this. So if I can find some things that I can do at home that would help strengthen that, then I would feel a little bit better about trying to go back to the gym. I just don't want to run to the gym and then start doing stuff and, you know, hurt myself more. But my impetus for wanting to do this is that my husband and I are talking about possibly doing a canoe trip late this year in Florida. And I just know that me spending a week in a canoe, in the position that I have to be in, like kind of kneeling and sitting in the boat, will kill my back. Because I did it one time last year when we took my grandson canoeing, and my back was just horrible that night. I couldn't even sleep. So I know if we're going to do that, I need to be in better shape, and I need my back to be in better condition. So I figure if I start now, that should be, you know, a much more doable thing come December if we actually end up doing that trip. So that is that. That's 10% and 90%. And so now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about shop news. I don't actually have a lot to talk about. I wanted to talk to you about the monthly makes program, which officially is already going on, but February will be the first month that you'll get to actually post projects. You know, your finished objects for your February monthly make. So I will be putting a finished object thread up for February before February starts. I've already gone through all of the information about the program. There's also a short video that I did a few weeks ago outlining the whole program and how that will work. So I would direct you to either that or the thread on Ravelry in the Fiber Nymph Dye Works group that gives you all of what you need to know to participate. Basically, this is your way to earn some free yarn this year by using up some of your Fiber Nymph Dye Works stash now. And there's also a lot of ways to do it this year to win prizes, because I've expanded the way to do it. There's just a lot of different options. So I really hope you'll join in. But the February round of it will be starting February 1st. So you might want to get ready for that if you haven't already started thinking and planning for that. Thank you very much to everybody who shopped the update last Wednesday. There are still some Valentine's colorways in the shop. There's still a good bit of the Ridgetop, both fingering and DK. So if you're interested in that and you're curious about it, you know, hop on over there and pick out a skein. There's still lace weight, that one-of-a-kind lace weight that's in there. I'm really thinking, every time I look at that bin that has the lace weight, I'm like, I really want to make something with that. I just don't know what. So we'll see. I may end up plucking one of those out of those there for myself. I wanted to let you know, a couple of weeks ago I showed you those little stitch marker tins, all the tins that had the bulb stitch markers in them, and I told you I was going to be putting them in the shop. I ended up running into a glitch, and I kept meaning to tell you guys about this. I told you if you purchased one of those along with anything else, there would be no shipping charge added, because they're very lightweight. It would only there would only be a shipping charge if they were shipping by themselves. Well, as it turned out, as wonderful as my new website and shop site is, there's actually no way for me or my web guy actually for us to set it up to not charge any shipping if it's going with something else. Like the system just wouldn't know that. So sorry, there's like a fuzzy. I'm going to look for alternative ways to do that. Worst case scenario, I may just only be able to sell them at shows. I don't know. But I may end up having to do it so that, like, if you're buying it with something else, you get charged a penny or something. Okay? I don't know. I want to have them in the shop because I think they're fun, but I have to make it work without it being ridiculous in how much it ends up charging for shipping. Well, I'll figure it out. But I just want to let you know, I hadn't forgotten about them, but that's why they are not in the shop yet. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I am getting Hiya needles in. I talked about this a few months ago. I said I was going to start carrying them, and I was finally able to place my order. So I will be getting them in. I'm limiting what I'm getting in to begin with, just until I figure out what people are interested in. I ordered 16-inch, 24-inch, and 32-inch lengths, mostly from size 0 through size US 9. There were a couple things that were back ordered, so they might not be in right away in all the sizes, but that's mostly it. And I'm only doing the steels, not the sharps right now. Eventually, I might also carry the sharps, but I'm going to just get the steels in for the time being. If there's a size or a cord length that I didn't order in and there's something that you would really like to see in the shop, let me know, and I will keep that in mind for when I place future orders. I'm really excited to have these because I love Hiya needles. They are really, in my mind, they're some of the best needles I've ever used, and they are very affordable. I just like them so very much. So anyway, that's what I'm getting in right now, and they should be in the next couple of weeks, I think, and so you can look for those to be in the shop, and I will, of course, let you know when that happens. The other thing I wanted to let you know and give you a heads up on is my update schedule for the rest of the first half of this year. I'm going to be moving away from doing set update times for a number of reasons. Mostly it involves time. And I'm not going to go into all the details because you don't really need to know. But suffice to say, I'm going to be adding things to the shop as they're ready. So the best way to stay alert about that is probably social media, Instagram, and the Fiber Nymph Dyeworks page on Facebook. Those are the two places that kind of information will always be up there as it happens. Check the shop. I will probably be posting things on the front page, like up at the very top bar. I will put when something new has gone in. When I do the newsletter, I will definitely highlight anything new that's in the shop since the last newsletter. Let's see, how else? Podcast, I'll definitely, again, tell you about things on the podcast too. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that. But speaking of shows, I do also want to tell you the shows that I'm doing this spring that are coming up. Indie Knit and Spin is Saturday, February 23rd. That's here in Pittsburgh at the Ace Hotel. I love that show. I do it all the time. Well, I've done it a lot. I really love that show. A new show for me will be the Allentown Fiber Festival in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is at Merchant Square Mall, and that is the 13th and 14th of April. I will not be at Homespun Yarn Party this year. I really wanted to apply for it again this year, but I didn't even send in my application because, as it turns out, my mom is having hip replacement surgery in March, and I'm probably going to be going down there for I'm going to definitely be going down there, but I'm probably going to be gone for about a week, and it was just too close to Homespun for me to do that. And I have two other shows on either side of that, so I decided Homespun was not in the cards for me this year, but hopefully I'll get to apply to it next year and maybe be back at that one. But anyway, Allentown's new for me, so I'm really looking forward to that one. I will be at Needles Up Maryland again this year. Yay! I love that show. It was so much fun. That is Friday, May 3rd. Sorry, the Friday before Maryland Sheep and Wool. So that'll be great, and it's at the same location as last year. I will not be at Maryland Sheep and Wool, though. That's the funny thing. Bill and I are gonna drive down to do Needles Up on Friday and then come home that same night because then we're leaving Saturday morning to go on vacation. We are taking a motorcycle trip on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which I'm sure you'll hear more about as we approach that time. Anyway, and then after that, my next show will be Stitches United in Atlanta, which is from May 31st to June 2nd. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's the first Stitches event I've ever done. I'm very excited about doing that as well. I made my hotel reservations. They do have registration for that is now open, like for classes and everything. So if you're interested and you're going to be going there and want to check that out, that stuff is all open on their website now. So those are my shows for my upcoming spring season. And then I don't have any more until I have one midsummer and then going into fall. But I'll talk about those later on. Those are the 4 that are coming up. Doing a a few fewer shows than I did last year, but I think it'll work out better considering other things I've got going on this year. All right, I believe that's everything I want to tell you about. Again, please, the Fiber Nymph Dye Works Instagram account is an excellent way to stay in touch in between podcasts. The Fiber Nymph Dye Works page on Facebook is another place that I post, but if you're watching Instagram, it's the same stuff going on to Facebook. The website, I put a lot of information up there, and the newsletter, which I didn't send it out for a few weeks, and I sent one out last week, so I'm going to try to get back into the weekly rotation of doing a newsletter. All right, that's everything. Again, full show notes will be in both the Fiber Nymph Dye Works group in the episode thread, and also in the description box here on YouTube. I hope you have a fabulous week. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Stay warm if you are also getting these crazy, crazy cold temperatures. And I will talk to you again next week. Bye.